So Dr. Rivera and I first met in April 2014. She was the consultant who saved my husband's life when he was diagnosed with bacterial meningitis and septicemia. Since then, we have actually become friends, and I'm very grateful to be able to say that. So today is essentially a conversation about our journey together. So there's a lot of preconceptions about healthcare in the US coming from the UK. And I think for me, one of the things that struck me was the kindness that was demonstrated by really everyone who was involved in our journey. Right from the paramedics who showed up. When they first showed up, I was actually very apologetic because I didn't at that point actually realize how unwell he was. I actually phoned 911 because I realized that we needed to get to the hospital, and also I couldn't drive in the US. But it hadn't occurred to me that he was actually slipping into a coma. The paramedics were very kind, and things that they really didn't have to do, like for example, my son was 8 years old at the time. There were 3 paramedics, and one of them got Rohan to sit in the front seat. I haven't told this to you, Cynthia, because we haven't actually had this conversation. We've talked about many things. So they got him to sit in the front seat, and they got him to blow the air horn. Like, they were basically just distracting him. And when we actually pulled up into the hospital grounds, at the barrier where the paramedics have to kind of phone in to say who's coming in, they got Rohan to speak on the walkie-talkie to sort of announce the arrival. And for an 8-year-old, till today, he remembers those moments of that day so clearly. And, those were kind of, the things that he was excited about, despite the fact that we were dealing with a bad situation. Very quickly, it was identified that Mandeep was very unwell, and the diagnosis of bacterial meningitis was put forth to us. Took me completely by surprise. I then sat the children down who were 8 and 10. We actually went to the cafeteria for lunch, and I basically told them that their dad was very unwell and there was a chance that he might not make it. And again, none of this happens like you see in the movies. Like we were all kind of dry-eyed. It was it was like we were talking about the weather, but it was literally me informing the children of the situation because I wanted them to be prepared. I remember you saying to me that it's just the meninges, and it's not an encephalitis, it's a meningitis. And therefore, it's almost like it's just, although he is in a coma and he's not responding, it's kind of the covering of the brain, right? And I remember very clearly that gave me a lot of hope. So I think what came across was someone who was very competent, but also someone who was able to speak to me at my level. This is what people need when they are on the receiving end of healthcare. In that very short space of time, you were able to give me hope that I actually was able to cling on to, that, okay, maybe it's not as bad as it seems. And then I remember you saying to me something, I can't remember the exact words, but something along the lines of, is there anything else that I can do for you, right? I don't know if you remember this, but at that point I said to you, well, actually, I need the insurance form signing. We walked out of the room and you filled that form in for me there and there, which I was not expecting. And I don't know if you realize this, Cynthia, but by you signing that form there and then, what it meant was that I could then phone up the insurance company and get all the kind of phone calls and everything done, so that within 24 hours we had got the approval that that we were covered, because the cost of healthcare in the US is not cheap. So it was a turning point, really, because then when Mandeep woke up the next day, and he had already started to try to figure out how we were going to pay for this unexpected holiday expense. And I was able to reassure him that that's okay, it's all taken care of. For me, that cycle of you kind of looked after us, not just from the point of view of what medications do I need to prescribe to this patient, but how do I reach out and instill hope, and how can I go that little bit extra? I don't know if you remember this, Cynthia, because I know you have like a gazillion patients that you see on a day in, day out basis.
I remember, and I have to be honest, I was not expecting to feel so emotional hearing that story, and I feel the emotions of that story. 7 years ago, it's almost 7 years ago, I didn't know 7 years ago that there was a big part of me that was seeking to connect with patients when situations are at their most dire. And I'll never forget your children's faces. Never.
Right.
I do remember. There's vivid things that I remember. Their faces is one. I felt a huge responsibility to reassure them, to keep calm, and to really be on my A game as a physician, to make sure their precious father was healthy and well and able to return home with them. I've learned so much in the last 7 years, and it has been a journey. We have shared this journey together.
Yes, we have. Yeah.
But I vividly remember.
I couldn't stop thinking about what you had done for us that day, right? And I wanted to say thank you. So I remember getting a card, and I think I got you an orchid plant or something like that. And I remember as I was writing the card, thinking to myself that she does this on a day in, day out basis. And I know that because I'm a medical professional myself, right? So I'm like, to her, I'm just another patient, right? So I almost didn't write the card because I was thinking this is like a bit too kind of touchy-feely, like, maybe she really, those were the thoughts that were kind of going through my mind as I was writing it. Because remember, I didn't know anything about you, like nothing. It was literally just those 5 or 10 minutes that we spent in the ER, right? And then after that, we met other members of the team. So it's not like I got to know you. And then we left Miami, and we were just we were in touch, but very, very briefly, right? We kind of connected, but we didn't have like a lot of an exchange. And then I think it was April 2017 when we visited Miami again as a family. And part of the reason we did that, actually the main reason we did that, was because it was recommended by the clinical psychologist that was looking after Rohan to say that, as part of the recovery to the trauma, the post-traumatic sort of responses that he had, because he was only 8 at the time, Miami had, let's just say it wasn't going to be our favorite holiday destination because we'd had this experience. So it's almost a case of going back and confronting your, in inverted commas, worst nightmare. So we decided that we were going to do this. So we came back 3 years later, and we wanted to connect with the people who we had connected with in Miami 3 years prior, and you were one of them. So I remember I sent you an email. I didn't hear back. So then we arrived in the hospital, we walked around, we went to the ED department. I said, okay, well, we haven't been able to get in touch with Cynthia, but we decided to just go to your office anyway, right? On the off chance, knowing full well that chances of you being there were like next to zero, right? So I remember we went to the office, and your hospital is huge, right? It's massive. And then out of nowhere, like you show up, right? Do you remember that?
Yes.
And we were like, oh my God, first of all, we didn't recognize you because it'd been like 3 years. We wasn't even sure it was the right person. And yeah, it was, that was kind of us kind of reconnecting. I remember hugging you, and I remember the hug that was really tight. And I remember thinking, this is like not a regular kind of, doctor-patient kind of, there was already kind of something more kind of, brewing, so to speak. And, we didn't know, anything about you. We didn't know anything about your family. And, we had breakfast with your husband and two children the next day. And again, I'm thinking in my head, but surely she's got other things that she wants to do. Like, surely she's busy, like, So it's interesting how that inner tape works, right? We had this amazing breakfast and we connected, the two families connected. But yeah, we've never actually had this conversation, have we, really?
Not in its totality.
No.
Not, revisiting from the beginning.
Yeah.
And I really just love the reflections that are coming up from hearing 2014
Yes.
and then coming back in 2017 because
Yes.
a lot had been going on. But I was going through a period of very, I would call it turmoil about where I saw myself as a physician.
Yeah.
And in 2014, I was unconscious about it. But what fueled my fire, so to speak, were moments like seeing you and your family in the emergency department. Those moments of connecting with humanity, of feeling the weight of the responsibility that I had from the perspective of seeing the loved ones and their impact so firsthand. Dr. Cynthia Rivera in 2014, coming into that emergency room 3 years into her practice, feeling that call to get those papers signed, get them the help that they need. It's not about the medicine, it's about showing them that we're here for them. And that includes signing insurance papers, and that includes reassuring the children, all of it.
Yeah.
And 2017, 3 years later, having had some turmoil, some feelings of what some people term burnout or conflict about how happy I was as a medical professional because I was not able to have those connections on a consistent basis, feeling like I was making a difference, feeling like I'm making an impact in people's lives. There was already a major shift happening in those 3 years.
So you have the ability to connect with people on a human level, right? Because that's what you did with us. But it sounds like what you're saying is that you have this inner kind of desire to want to do more than just that. Because, we have, I think what happens with a lot of our colleagues is that it just becomes a job, right? You go in, you prescribe the meds, and you almost have to switch off the human connection, because if you get too connected to your patients, well, then you find yourself having a Facebook Live conversation with them 7 minutes later. And you can't take them all home, right? You can't carry all that weight. So we tend to have to be a little bit detached. And that's how we cope. But then the risk of that is that you lose the human connection. And ultimately, what people want is that human connection. That's what, it doesn't even matter what arena of health you're in, but people just want to feel that you're connecting with them as a human being and you're hearing their story. And you were obviously able to do that in your role as a, infectious diseases consultant, but it sounds like you have this desire now to do even more than that.
Absolutely. Our second encounter in 2017 was right around the time that I was hitting a low point in almost a desperation to run away from medicine altogether. And this is along the lines of stories that I haven't fully shared with you.
Yeah.
I was ready to walk away from everything because I felt that I was not being my authentic self in Western medicine. I love hearing the reflections from other countries about the U.S. healthcare system.
I was expecting my credit card details to be taken when I phoned 911, which didn't happen. And it was only I think at around 4:30 in the evening when someone came up to me and very kindly said to me that, we need to start thinking about payment and how this is, it was literally 7-8 hours into the process and everything had stabilized and we had a plan. So it literally did not happen like that at all for us. And I'm sure it wasn't just that we were lucky, or that we just landed up in your hospital. So it's all about these preconceived ideas that we have, right?
Right. I think anytime we generalize about anything, including a healthcare system of an entire country, it's always an extreme view. Our minds tend to want to compartmentalize and have a firm idea of how things are, and I'm sure there's a lot of variability in how people experience the system. One thing that we do well in the United States is emergency care.
So I didn't realize that you were starting to shift. So, in 2017 was actually the first time we actually had a sort of regular connection, right? We had breakfast with the two families. And I just saw you as an infectious disease consultant who was top of her game. I didn't realize that you were starting to open up into sort of the more holistic way of thinking. And then I think, I can't remember when we next sort of spoke about sort of this arena. I think was the start of the COVID pandemic, because I remember by that stage I had started to become a lot more involved in alternative and holistic health. And I remember sort of sharing a text exchange with you at the start of the COVID pandemic to say, hey, are you taking these supplements? Because I didn't realize that you were even in that space. I guess I thought you were a very regular infectious disease consultant. And I remember you replied to say, well, actually, I'm already on X, Y, and Z, but I'll add these other things that you suggested. And I thought, oh, like, that's interesting. So she knows about, like it was like a revelation for me. And then I think we kind of we carried on that kind of trajectory until I had this idea of my time to be. And I was like, the intention originally was to provide frontline key workers with a tool, because I had in my head, I knew that these were people who were working long shifts and, not really having any downtime. It was literally like you work a really long shift, you come home, you're lucky if you get time to eat, you're lucky if you get enough sleep, and then you're back at the job again, and it's relentless. So I felt a calling to create something that could help these frontliners. And I thought, oh, I know, I'll share this idea with Cynthia and see what she says. So it was literally an idea that it had just come to me on, it just landed. And I remember texting you to say, hey, I was just wondering if, this is a good idea. And you literally replied within minutes to say, oh, that's amazing, count me in. And I'm like, but there isn't anything to be in, it doesn't exist. But when you responded the way you did, it was actually the rocket fuel that made me have to then go ahead and make the thing, right? Because there was no my time to be at that point. And so yeah, I think it's also really interesting how the way we respond to people actually serves as something to kind of nudge them along the way. Because if I got a lukewarm response from you, maybe my time to be wouldn't even exist today, right? But it was because you were like so enthusiastic that I almost felt that, okay, I have no choice now, I have to go and make it because, and I remember you said to me that, yes, I'm still in, but I don't think I can do this in the group setting, which is what I was kind of hoping for. And you said, I really need one-to-one support, right? I need to do it one-to-one. And I was all up for that, but I felt really nervous because I'm like, okay, I really don't want Dr. Cynthia Rivera to be my first one-to-one, right? Mm-hmm. I want to practice with like regular folk. So it was quite daunting for me. It felt like I was jumping in the deep end because I have such a huge amount of respect for you. I didn't actually know if I could deliver what was needed, to be very honest. So I don't know if that came across. So I feel that you have been a key part of the whole formation of my time to be, you know, by the way you've responded and kind of nudging me along, and believing in me, really. So, you know, I wanted to thank you for that, because I don't think, you know, it would be where it is if not for that. So yeah.
It goes both ways. It really goes both ways. I thank you because every time I would receive an angel in the mail, you and your family would send me angels. I was reminded of my purpose.
Yeah.
You and your family were literally a beacon to help me through what you may not realize was a really tough time in my life. 2017, I hired a life coach who taught me, we named it the saboteur, taught me the, as you call, the inner tape when you do your sessions of My Time to Be. Stories in my head of who I am and who I'm not that impact my ability to connect with patients. And there was something powerful about that interaction in the emergency department. And there was something very loving and continuous about staying in touch and seeing the children grow and seeing the way that enduring health and bringing a person back to health can impact an entire family long term. And so that was a culmination of, you know, that was a starting point to do a lot of work, to do a lot of inner work. And through the inner work, I started connecting with how I could show up as a physician in my way. And you simultaneously were in that path of discovery as well. And so when it culminated in My Time to Be, when you talked to me about the idea of My Time to Be in here, I knew that that was going to come to fruition. And I was so impressed. From concept to reality, to being able to put content out, I think is absolutely inspiring to somebody like me who's on a similar journey as a physician. And I'm impressed. I'm impressed because I've done years of similar work, and to see these concepts in a course that is so user-friendly, one should say. You know, I think you and I have done a lot of this work, but I can tell that these concepts, for someone who maybe has never explored mindfulness, or how we go through our days sometimes without exploration about our thoughts and why they're there, and our emotions and how they go through us, to be able to deliver content in a way that is reachable to everyone, I think is impressive. And it was the right time. And that's where you and I really unite as healthcare professionals, because we feel called to be part of that shift.
I've been going through this sort of journey of, first of all, acquiring knowledge, and then trying to figure out how I can use that newfound knowledge together with my medical background to actually create impact. And that journey took years, I think, in the making. So, you know, the journey just takes as long as it does. And I think what's really powerful is when two powerful women can come together and share their vulnerability, then you kind of you almost get exponential growth from that. Because, you know, you and I now, we will be connected for forever. Like, you know, you can't just say, okay, goodbye. You know, this is like a lifelong connection now. And if we could just keep this between you and me, right? Because it's private, right? But it's quite brave and courageous for both of us to say, do you know what, we're going to share this wider, because it would encourage other people to connect with others in their circle in a similar way. And that's what's so empowering. And that's how you kind of spread it. You spread that human connection.
I agree. I agree. It was clear to me, looking at My Time to Be, that was a culmination of years of work. The depth of the courses, My years of work recognized years of work. My new mantra has been, I am the light that unites through compassion. And so no matter in the space of compassion, that can be anything. I'm on the COVID ward right now. I have to, after this call, I have to go, I have an entire ward of COVID patients. And it's as simple as, are they craving chocolate? Do they want to talk about how scared they are? Do they want me to speak to their family members and reassure them via FaceTime that they're okay? And so I'm learning how to cultivate a space of compassion in every patient encounter. And I'm working with doctors in training. I'm an associate program director of an internal medicine residency, and I'm a program director of the Fellowship for Infectious Disease. So I have trainees, I have young doctors. And when we have the conversations, much like you and I always have the conversations, there was always a deep longing for human connection. I think the first step is talking about how that makes us feel and talking about how we as medical professionals can be the change. And that's the journey right now. That's the journey that I'm personally on while still navigating the pandemic.
Yeah, so it's almost like getting the workforce to function at a higher level, because when you shut out the human side of you and do your job as a clinician, that's actually easier. But when you let the person in and you start to allow that person to enter and make that human connection, it actually requires more of you, right? Because, then if the patient doesn't make it, or, when you see the children, you haven't got that block. But the plus side of it is that the patient can see that, you feel that. You don't even have to say the words. It's an energetic thing that you just feel that this person really cares. But I think traditionally it's the same in the UK. The coping mechanism, if you like, for clinicians has always been that we put up these walls and we don't get too involved, because we can't afford to get so involved, because we're seeing, this is like a conveyor belt, right? We do this for our bread and butter. So I think it's almost like asking for more, right? It's almost asking more of our frontliners. But if they did this, then their work they need to have a way to offload. If you're going to feel a human connection with every single patient that you see, when you come home at the end of the day, you're going to feel the weight of that, right? Because you've some part of your humanness has been affected. So then how do you offload that? So if you don't have a mindfulness, and if you're not grounded, you wouldn't be able to cope. Then you're going to get burnout. And that's why those barriers were there to begin with, because then it becomes you're almost like doing a job. It's very mechanistic. Or you have meningitis, here you go, here's your antibiotics. Yeah, give me the form of my secretary, send it me. Okay, goodbye, thank you. I've done my job. I've treated the meningitis, but I haven't connected with you as a human being, and I haven't given you hope. For those 24 hours when my husband was in a coma, I clung to those words that you said to me, that it's okay, it's just meningitis, it's not. You connected with me on my level as well. So it takes something more of the person who's delivering. And I think if we want our workforce to function in this way, they need to have the tools in their toolbox to enable to function at that level. And that's not there as a regular thing. There aren't many so-called conscious doctors out there.
That's right. That's right. And I think what I've experienced is the way that the energy functions is that when one is entering the humanistic space, yes, one is providing a loving connection to the patient. That same connection nourishes us as medical professionals. When I connect with someone in a human, compassionate space, I learn much more about them. I am much more keen on how I can heal them than if I look at the surface and I look at their chart and I ask perfunctory questions that everyone must ask. I'm not feeling as whole when I go home, and I know that the patient interaction could have been deeper. And one thing I'm normalizing, I may not understand as a Western trained physician why your sadness is causing you to feel abdominal pain. Just giving you an example. But I
Yeah.
believe that there's a connection there. And if we talk about it, maybe we can come to an understanding and maybe you can feel better.
So this way of thinking and the desire to want to connect with our patients in this way, do you see yourself as a pioneer almost, or do you think it's much more kind of there are more people like you out there who think like you?
Yeah. No, and I do think there is the concept of that we do get into echo chambers, so to speak. So we ourselves personally know of people doing this. But I think in the broader context of medicine, we are pioneers. And what I am sensing in the conversations is there's different levels of consciousness of it, but there's a deep longing to be connected with patients, a deep sadness at the systematic throughput of patients through a system without the connection being present. And most physicians, nurses, healthcare professionals cannot put their finger on what that is. And I think one thing that we're doing is we're opening up, we're articulating what that is. And
Yeah.
we're helping to at least put a name to what that is. I love the term moral injury. I use it a lot. I talk about it a lot. And when I give talks on moral injury, the response is by far more robust than I was expecting every time.
What is your definition of a moral injury?
Moral injury is when one, just to simplify it, it's when a situation or a system that one is navigating in has conflicting masters, so to speak. So if you need to serve the master that is the insurance company, which is see patients as quickly, as efficiently as possible, and your other master is the patient in front of you needing 45 minutes of your time, distraught over a new diagnosis, that's a major conflict. And when you're forced to make that choice, or when one is forced to make that choice, you question whether you are a moral being.
Yeah.
It stems from war times when a general will give an order to a soldier to enact maybe to shoot at someone, and you have a conflict. Am I a moral being? We have those conflicts in medicine, when we want to keep our jobs and we serve the master of the hospital administration and the insurance company, and we don't serve our fellow human being in front of us, that creates an injury within our psyche of who we are as healers. And there's just different levels of one's consciousness of what that is. Even the simple act of articulating it is healing.
Acknowledging it is huge. And to be honest, most people go into medicine because they want to heal, right? Now, I couldn't function in 10-minute appointments or 15 minutes. I was always running late. But it has become normalized. Everyone is working and so if you're the only one who's saying, hang on a second, I'm not doing that, then you're really the odd one out.
We're shifting. I can feel it. I think we're shifting. And I do still feel like we're pioneers, but there's a deep longing for the healing power of connection. And I feel the shift in medicine.